I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we get to have a conversation. I want to tell you some things I think will be helpful to you, be good for you. If you work with people, if you're in a family, if you have brothers or sisters, you have children, you have parents, if you are on a swim team, in a golf club, if you are in a bowling league, if you are part of a church, if you work with people, one of the things you must master is the art of reconciliation, of repairing relationships when they break. Because nothing lasts forever but God. And all the rest of us break, including our friendships, our relationships, our marriages, our relationship with our kids. Things break. The key isn't having a relationship that never breaks. The key is getting back up and fixing it. So I want to tell you about what it's like to create that fix, because the relationship, when it works, is like heaven on earth, isn't it? And when it's broken, it's like hell. So what is it like when it works? Abraham Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." He said it on June 16th in 1885. He had just been chosen to run for the Illinois Senate against Stephen Douglas. Lincoln's law partner, a guy named Warren, said, "Your language is too strong and too alarmist, and I want you to tone it down." And Lincoln said, "I want to strike home to the mind of men in order to rouse them to the peril of the time." Isn't that good? I want to rouse them to the peril of the time. Lincoln knew that a great nation had to be a united nation, that every great accomplishment is done by people who are united, who get on the same page, who know what it is to become a team. And whenever we describe conflict, it is usually not a sign of some great accomplishment. That when the Bible has this mythology at the beginning of the creation of the world, it describes all of creation, Adam and Eve and God, in this perfect harmony. And when they want to describe everything falling apart, the description is they fall apart from God, they're in conflict with Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, they commit murder, and they're thrown out of the garden. That disharmony, the breaking apart of our lives, is awful. And when they come together, it's something sweet. You know what I mean, right? So I want to talk about how we do that repair. I want to spend some time on giving you some tools I've learned about how to repair things when they break. That be all right? You ready to go? If you want to take notes, it's going to be worthwhile. It's going to be something you can use in a variety of places with a variety of people. I'll be giving you some things that will help. I think it's important to do because Paul in Ephesians tells us that there is this relationship that we have that's like two hands coming together, and you kind of wrap your fingers like this, and it's then like somebody has poured glue on your hands, and you just can't pull it apart. But there are other relationships we have that we're as far apart as night and day, like they're magnets and they're opposing polarizations. And we just can't, no matter how we try, get them together. When he wants to describe what Jesus Christ has done to the world, of all the things he could say, he describes it as reconciliation. Of Jews and Greeks who were in hostility with each other have found a way to be part of the same community. And that community, that coming together, that unity, becomes the place where God dwells. I just don't want us to take the power of the church and our relationship with God and our relationship with each other for granted. I don't want us to treat it as common, as something that just doesn't matter anymore. Sharon, my wife, 42 years this November, Sharon invited me out on our first date while we were in high school, proving she was the smartest woman in our class. When she called and we talked for an hour, I can't tell you how nervous I was to show up at the gym at Harrisonburg High School for the first dance. It's like sweaty palms. And now, when I've done something stupid and Sharon has decided talking to me is a gift I don't deserve, it's like all the anxiety comes back. The palms sweat again, and I just don't want to lose that. I don't want that relationship to become common, taken for granted. I don't want to become numb to how special it is. Do you know what I mean? So that's what Paul is trying to say to these people in Ephesus, that this new thing, this church, that is different than all the other religions that surround them, has one at its core Jesus Christ, who comes to the world proclaiming peace. Peace. One of the ways I try to help myself not take this stuff for granted is I do something called priming every morning. When I wake up in the morning, I am usually in the mood of the dream I had just before I awoken. Usually it is Sharon has done something that's made me furious. Only in my dreams. Only in my dreams. Sharon's done something that's made me furious, and I'm now in a bad mood. And I look at her with this sour look on my face like, why'd you do that? And she's going, what? And so I know that my mood gets set by the dream with which I awake. Anybody else do that? Just a few of us. The rest of you have no idea what I'm talking about. Sorry. So what I do is in the first 10 minutes I'm awake, usually sometimes it's just 5, I want to prime myself. I don't want to live my life started with the mood created by a dream over which I had no control. So I start this thing called appreciation. I list things I'm grateful for. But I only list 3. And the reason is, making a list is kind of easy, but it doesn't change my mood. If I want to change my mood, what I have to do is I have to luxuriate in the thing I'm grateful for. Spend some time with it. So like I have pictures of my grandchildren. You probably know their names. I talk about them way too much. But I have pictures of my grandchildren near my bed, and so when I'll look at them, and I'm grateful for them. I'm happy for them. I remember them playing soccer. I remember them making pumpkins with me. I remember putting them to sleep at night, and I'll spend time with each one of those scenes until I've changed my mood. I've changed my state. My shoulders go back, my head goes up, I begin breathing deeply, and I become present to them, like they're really in the room with me. And in that moment, I change. I prime myself for the kind of day that I want to have. My grandfather built the house that he and my grandmother lived in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, in a little community called Singer's Glen on the top of a hill that's worth absolutely nothing. At least it was 100 years ago. It's worth a lot now. The house they lived in, he built with his own hands. Doesn't make it a great house, makes it a bad house, but it was something I was proud of. The only water in the house was available through a cistern. I don't know if you know what a cistern is, but it's like a garage buried in the ground. So it's concrete in which there's just this giant hole that catches rain. And it has gutters so that all the pollen and the dirt that's on the roof can be gathered up in the gutters and delivered into the cistern. It was a long time ago. My mother grew up hating the taste of water, and she had never seen water that wasn't yellow. The way you got water out of the cistern was something called a pump. And it was made out of aluminum. It was right next to the cistern. And you would have to pump because it's called, that's where it gets its name, right? So you do it like this. But what you have to do, because it's dry, is it won't pull any water up unless you have a bucket of water nearby. You pour the water into the pump. It's called prime. Now, this is a sacrifice. You don't have any water. The only way to get water is you have to give up the water you have, put it in the pump, then you start get all the water that you need. But you got to prime the pump. So there's some times in the morning I don't think I have any time. There are a million things I have to do, and if I give time to priming, then I won't be able to get everything done. But the truth is, if I prime myself with this deep appreciation for the goodness that has come into my life, it changes everything. Changes my state, changes my anticipation of the world. Paul knew if he could say to the Ephesians, God proclaims to you peace, so that when you think of God, you're not thinking of the one who's out to get you, the one whom you have disappointed, but the God who loves you and finds you significant and who wants you more than anything and would let his own son die for you. If you spend some time there in an appreciation, it just changes everything. I mean, I think it is possible when you've heard about God all of your life, or maybe if it's recent, you can just make it common. You can make it like it's no big deal. That the peace that is proclaimed by Jesus Christ, it becomes numb, right? It grows numb. Elizabeth Barrett in the 1800s grew up in a family of 12. She was one of 3 girls. Her father inherited all of his money from the sugar plantations of his dad. He kind of ran the plantation as a tyrant, told the children they should never marry but spend all of their life working on the plantation with him. She was a brilliant mind, one of the world's greatest writers of all time. She's written some of the most scintillating, incredible books that have ever been published in the English language. Some of the most beautiful poetry. She learned Greek. She scholared all of the Greek philosophers. She taught herself Hebrew and read the Old Testament from the beginning to the end in its original language. She was brilliant in all of her writing. At the age of 15, she fell in love with a guy named Robert Browning. Knowing the opinion of her father, she got married by eloping and then moved from England to Ireland, like Dad wouldn't notice. Dad, wanting control, told her she had a chance to come back or never come home. They made a life in Ireland, and every week she wrote to her mom and dad a letter, which are some of the most beautiful poetry the world possesses, every week. And she never got a letter back, never got a response, never got a visit, until her 10th anniversary of her marriage, when she got a box from her family, from her mom and dad. And in the box was every letter she had written unopened. Now, if you ask the parents, they would tell you that their daughter died to them. But we know that something in them died. That when they made themselves numb to her, something inside of them didn't move anymore. I tell you this as a warning that every relationship we have with God, with each other, and with our enemies has the potential to degenerate into numbness, coldness, so that we're like this and will not come together. It's kind of the humility of what Paul is writing to the Ephesians. Do not take this for granted. Do not make this common. Do not grow numb to the work of the Holy Spirit among us. But hear the word of peace, this experience of intimacy, of becoming one so that glue has been poured over your hands and you can't take them apart. Cleo Medanis, a brilliant psychologist, the end of the 20th and beginning of the 21st century, Cleo Medanis, said that there are 6 human needs that we all have. And if you want to know how you're doing in your relationship, that it's not numb, but it's intimate, and those will be the 2. You get moved by somebody. You know when you're close to somebody, you can, when they walk in the room, like when you walk into church, there's some people you see, and as soon as you see them, you light up, your face brightens, your eyes brighten, and you treat them like, I have been waiting to see you all week. I'm so glad we're here. Or you know what it's like just to be cold and pretend as if you don't see anybody, right? So I want to give you the 6 human needs that defines this experience of peace that God has given us in Jesus Christ. And you can use it to evaluate your relationship with God, your relationship with each other, those people that are precious to you, and those that are the enemies that you never want to see again. And then I'm going to encourage us to find one enemy, one person from whom we're estranged. It doesn't have to be the worst estrangement of all time. You don't have to fix your relationship with Dad today. But there may be somebody that you can make it better. So let me give you the 6. Are you ready? And you can write these down and use it for the rest of your life. You can use it to hand off to somebody else. These are, I think they're good. I think they're solid. 6 human needs. And if you are in a relationship with somebody who meets 2 of these human needs, you will be intimately connected like this to them. If you have a relationship in which none of these needs are being met, you are 1 foot out of the door. You have grown numb to this person. So it's a good way to evaluate what we're doing. Are you ready to go? You guys are great. Thank you. So first is we need security, certainty. We know there's something you can count on. We know that we have food. We know that we have shelter. We know we have freedom of movement, that the body is healthy and well and strong. We have certainty. We know this is true. We know somebody's got our back. So a relationship ought to give you certainty, right? The number 2 is variety, uncertainty, surprise. That it's not enough to go to Old Town to eat every meal. You ought to have some other places you can go. There ought to be some variety in your life and variety in that relationship. Number 3, significance. You need to know that you're significant to someone and that you make somebody else know they're significant to you. If you are in a relationship and your spouse believes that their children are the most important part of their life, followed only by the family of their own origin, their mom and dad, followed only by the dog, the cat, the parakeet, and the goldfish. And when all of their needs are met, they'll get around to you. You do not have a relationship of significance, and I guarantee you, you will find one someplace else. That's it, okay? Love. So it's certainty, variety, significance, and love. That's kind of warmth I said when you walk through the door, when you see somebody, there's nothing that holds you back. There's no agenda you have. There's no hitch in your get-along. There's no rubbing sandpaper against your soul. There's we're just together. That sense of love, that sense of connection is what everybody wants. 5 is growth. That in the relationship you're growing, you're learning. You teach something and they teach you something. That there's maybe failure, and that's okay because you learn from the failure. You do stuff together, and in you're doing it, there's this liveliness to your life and to what you're learning from each other. And last, contribution. You know you are part of something bigger than you that contributes to you, and you appreciate it, and you also contribute to the well-being of the whole. That we are contributed to and we contribute. Those are the 6 needs we have as human beings. So if you want to evaluate, I'd like you to right now think of somebody with whom you have a great relationship, somebody to whom you're really close, and see if what I say, what Cleo Madonna says, is true. 1, if you were to evaluate it off a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least connected and 10 being the most connected, how would you think of this relationship with the person you now have in mind? How would you think you're doing on the certainty, the security? You know they have your back. 1 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 10. With this person that's important to you, how are you doing on variety, spontaneity, surprise? Number 3, significance. Number 4, love. Number 5, growth. Number 6, contribution. My guess is if you have somebody that you feel very close to, you're between an 8 and a 10 on at least 2 of those categories. And what I tell you is that means you'll never let that person go. You will never let them go. Now, if you were to think about the person with whom you have an estranged relationship, one that's not so strong, if you're between 4 and 7, you probably have a really solid friendship. That's a really good thing. But if you're 3 or below on all 6 categories, you might want to think if that's the way you want it to stay. And you might. There's some relationships where it's best just not to stir the pot. But there might be somebody with whom you want to make it better. You want to move it up just a level, just one more. You don't have to fix every relationship you've ever had. I'm not suggesting that. You don't have to move everything into intimacy so that you're like this. But this moving from here to there is part of what Christ proclaimed to the world. That God offers this to us, peace in the name of Jesus Christ. And Lord knows our world needs this kind of peace. I read about the segregation of the 1950s and the race riots of the 1960s. There were victories won in the United States, and I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to segregated pews or segregated restrooms. I don't want to go back where races are in hate with each other. I want there to be this proclamation of peace. That is the church's gift to the world. We're going against some difficult times. With every month that comes, there's a new revelation of clergy abuse of children in the Roman Catholic Church that makes the rest of the religious community like a place you should not trust. The United Methodist Church in February is going to have a conference to decide if gays are allowed into the pews of our congregations. To even have that conversation, to me, is insulting. We just came off a Supreme Court nomination process in which I now am concluding that centrists are an endangered species in the United States. And I wonder what that means for the United Methodist Church that has been in the centrist position for 200 years, where George W. Bush and Hillary Rodham Clinton are counted as members of the same organization. Is this just like something from another era, another time that just doesn't fit anymore? Or is peace, this thing called peace, something we're skilled at, something we're good at, something we want to be better at, and so we begin to offer it to the world? God has sent Jesus Christ to proclaim peace. We know it's possible for us to grow numb to the work of the Spirit among us. So to become alive again, to become intimate with God, to be moved by the things of God, to not be numb, I suggest we take the first step. Step one is to tell the people that you treasure, that are you like this, that, man, I do not take you for granted. Can we go out for coffee? I want this to continue. And then we'll find somebody with whom you are estranged, because this will be work, but you'll learn about how do you make it one step better. One step better. Christine described coming into the doors of Aldersgate and finding a place where she belongs, and now she's involved. How do we do that with as many people as we can? We do something called Sunday suppers, in which we get together on Sunday. We make food, and we take it into D.C., into the woods where homeless find shelter, and we sit down with them and have a meal. I need a few more people to help me do that this afternoon and tonight. If you would like to help, let me know. I'll get you on the list. But the point is to be an agent of peace, to create reconciliation, to know that that's our job. 5 years ago, I heard that hundreds, thousands of people were moving to Belvoir as this reorganization of military campuses. I had started a church when I was in Richmond, and I thought, I know what to do. Is there any great church serving that community? We love the military here. Military are a huge part of our congregation. How do we make sure they're taken care of? How do we make sure that we do something for them? So for 5 years, we studied what that would be like and how we would do it. We prayed, we raised money, we collaborated with other Methodist churches. And about 4 years ago, we started a new congregation in the Belvoir area. Jason Michelli, who was the pastor here, and I started it together, a unique idea that he was the pastor there and I was the pastor there, and he was still the pastor here and I was the pastor here. We ran both campuses together between the two of us. We did that for a year, and within 1 year, meeting in an elementary school, we had 100 people attending worship. This is a phenomenal thing. In February, 9 months into that project, Jason was diagnosed with stage serious cancer. From surgery to going on leave happened in 24 hours. He never said goodbye to that congregation. He never said goodbye to this one. But he started his recovery and chemotherapy. By the way, he's doing fabulous. So your prayers for his health and God's gracefulness is greatly appreciated. He's invited me to do a wedding workshop there in the late winter, early spring. And I will try to mess up everything at Annandale and tell everybody there to go to Aldersgate. That's my plan. That's my plan. Because that's what he's doing there. So for 6 months, I needed to be the person running this campus and that campus because I wasn't willing to let that place die. I was in the process of being an ambassador for peace, of taking things that were separate and making them one. That's the gift we have to give to the world. You don't give up on your main objective because it's hard, do you? Michelle Matthews came on board. Michelle is nothing like Jason in any way. Theologically, politically, they're like different. And so the question is, do we have room for people to have these different persuasions? Is it okay? Want to be okay? So lots of people stopped going to Kingstown because she wasn't Jason, and people stopped going because they didn't want to hear about Jason anymore. They just wanted to grow numb because it's so hard to think that the person you love may die. By the time the end of the summer came, there were 35 people attending Kingstown. And Michelle thought that was it. There was no way she could resurrect this, and her career was now over because she had been assigned to a church and would kill it. We're now 2 years in, and you should know this fall that they're averaging 90 people a Sunday. She has something called pop-up work. She shows up at all kinds of places. She'll show up with water bottles that have Kingstown's name on it at events where there are runs. She sits out in coffee shops with wearing her clergy collar. So people say, who are you? What are you? I'm with Kingstown. She has clergy conversations. They do something called pub theology, where they meet on a Tuesday night in a pub, and then they talk about the most complicated theological issues of the day. It is hard political stuff they discuss. And they do something called pop-up worship. So they leave the elementary school on a Sunday morning and will go out to the park, and 150 people will show up to worship with them in the park. She will figure out everyone who's new that she doesn't know and invite them to her house to have a Meet the Pastor gathering. And 10 to 20 people will show up in her small apartment, and then she'll shall tell them about this Jesus Christ, this faith of which we are a part, and invite their involvement. She's engaging them. Part of the reason we started Kingstown was to have a pilot project to learn how we could engage our community. Peace is not simply, we'll let you come to our pews, but we're going to build a relationship with you. That's our skill set. We'll fail, we'll try, but we cannot not try. What Christ came was to call to us peace. Thanks for listening. This is good stuff, don't you think? It's good stuff about who we are, why we are, and what we won't settle for. It isn't that we're going to think each other's perfect. Lord, you have me as a pastor. People decide to join the church in spite of my preaching. But we're committed to doing it together because it is God that has come in Jesus Christ to make us one. And in our oneness, the Holy Spirit dwells. And we replace a dead inside with a spirit that's moved by God, like going out on your first date. I offer to you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.